Hello, Spirit House here. Tonight I am reading The Secret of Light by Walter Russell. It's part 3. Um, we're still on the magnetic electric universe. This is my 5th video on this topic. And within that, we are starting the universal octave section, I should say. The heartbeat of the universe, starting from zero of rest, spirals from its minimum to its maximum and back again to zero, in 4 pairs of opposite actions and reactions. These 4 pairs of opposite electric interweavers constitute the universal spiral octave wave, by means of which the dynamic universe of effect rises from the static universe of cause. Figure 67, which I showed at the end of last chapter, but I'm going to show it again. The cosmic pendulum, contraction, expansion, positive, negative, 0 point inhalation, exhalation. Okay, so 0 to 4 means the centripetal direction toward the apex of the spiral, which leads to higher potential, density, gravity, and the white heat of incandescence. 4 to 0 means the centrifugal direction toward the base of the spiral, which leads to lower pressure, lower potential, vacuity, radiativity, and the black cold of space. Each of these is half of a cycle. The reason an octave cannot be counted from 1 to 8 instead of from 1 to 4 is because each of the pressures, which bear the relations of 1 to 4 positive in the octave, is a credit pressure, which it has its equal opposite debit pressure in 1 to 4 negative. The elements of matter born on the spiral pairs of opposites as tones have the same relation as tones of music have to the octave wave. All wave motion is expressed in 8 tones, 4 pairs of opposites. The middle pair is seemingly 1. That's the 0 point, basically. That's the 9th wave, or if you want to call it the 9th, it's the 0 point. That's my side note. The octave is usually expressed as 7 for this reason. An octave is a series of orderly, harmonic tones. Tones are multiplied and divided pressures of light, spaced rhythmically with mathematical precision upon each octave wave of motion. The law which applies to one effect of motion applies to all, whether sound wave, electric current, color spectrum, or octaves of elements of matter. No state of motion has permanence or even duration. Everything is forever in a state of transition, changing its position in its wave by either multiplying or dividing its vibration frequencies to change its conditioning. The basis of all octaves is the keynote of rest, from which the octave springs to express the idea which lies within the magnetic stillness of that keynote. The fulcrum of the wave of musical octaves is the keynote from which all tonal changes in the octave are mathematically calculated in wave frequencies and volume. That keynote is always in one's consciousness whether the note is being sounded or not. It is the balance of its octave. All tones are out of balance with it at all times and forever desire balance. No state of motion can evade the keynote of rest from which it sprang, nor can it be separated from it electrically in matter, or consciously in mind. No matter what instrument produces octave tones, its frequencies and other dimensions must be in the orderliness demanded by the opening and closing spiral pairs, which control those tones by conditioning them. Likewise, no matter what the instrument, whether larynx of man, string of violin, carbon wave field, or color spectrum, its sole motivating power for producing change of dimension for the purpose of producing change of tone is electric pressure directed by desire and borrowed from the keynote of the octave stillness. Furthermore, all power thus borrowed for one expression in any octave tone must be in balance with the opposite of that tone within which those borrowings have been debited. This outstanding fact of natural law must be borne in mind in considering those principles as applied to the mechanics of the universal wave, which produces the octave wave tones of the elements of matter with such precision that any effect produced by any of them in combination or separately will produce that same effect always. The elements of matter, An invariable characteristic of nature is to express life-death cycles of any idea in 9 lesser interweaving cycles enfolding in the one. When we think of man as an idea, we think of him as grown up to fullness of middle age. Until then, we think of generating man as infant, child, and youth. Following his generating cycles come the degenerative ones, in which he gradually repays all of his borrowings from his zero of rest and returns to that zero to again borrow power to re-express the idea of man. Figure 71. Let me find figure 71. They missed a few figures in this. They jumped to 71. Maybe he'll go back. But anyway, here's 71, the universal 9-octave cycle. And here is the true periodic table of elements. The other of the two charts gives to the World by Walter Russell in 1926. This is the true periodic table of elements. The one that is taught in schools to this day is incorrect. And there's elaborated explanation on that in lectures and other material from Walter Russell. I would recommend the home study course from philosophy.org, the University of Science and Philosophy, which Walter Russell and his wife Leo Russell founded. They have a home study course that's really awesome. But anyway, this is the correct periodic table of elements. So, oh yeah, he does go backwards with the other. This process of nature, which expresses its cycles of idea in 9 lesser cycles, is conspicuously present in the life-death cycles of the elements of matter. Carbon alone expresses the idea of matter. All the 9 octaves of the elements are stages of unfoldment and refoldment of carbon. The first 4.5 octaves lead to the maturity of carbon by the generative contraction of gravity. It is the hardest of all of the other stages of its transition, having the highest melting point. The last 4.5 octaves lead from maturity through old age to disappearance at the end of the 9-octave cycle by the radiative expansion of vacuity, figure 70. And that was the periodic table of elements that I just showed you. Genero-activity begins at the birth of carbon in the first octave with genero-active, inner explosive speed of light, which is 186,400 miles per second. It ends with an equal radioactive outer explosive speed. This speed is the limit at which motion can reproduce itself in curved wave fields before reaching zero, where motion and curvature cease. Carbon fulfills the plan of the Creator in his desire to create but one form, the cube-sphere. Carbon alone crystallizes in true cube, with all of the qualities of the true cube and sphere fully exemplified. All other elements which crystallize as cubes are octave extensions of carbon. All such extensions occupy the 404 position of wave amplitude. In carbon are all of the elements of this previous stages, just as in man are all of the actions and reactions of his previous stages. Hydrogen is a one octave younger prototype of carbon. It forms on the wave amplitude at 404, just as carbon forms at 404, 1 octave ahead. And hydrogen is a whole octave of elemental tones. Several of these have been recently discovered and wrongly named isotopes. Isotopes are split tones, such as those which a violinist could produce between full tones. An amazing thing happens at this point in the unfolding of carbon's life record. Hydrogen's melting point is 259 degrees below 0 centigrade, and in one octave, the winding up process of nature acts like a whiplash at its halfway position where general activity and radioactivity meets as equals. This effect tightens the winding of carbon into such a dense substance that the melting point jumps to 3,600 degrees above zero in that one octave. Nature immediately counterbalances this accelerative action by dropping nitrogen, the next element beyond carbon, into a gas which melts at 210 degrees below 0 centigrade. It does not recover from the gaseous condition during the rest of its octave. The cosmic seed of the carbon octave is helium. Silicon is one octave older than carbon. The melting point of silicon drops to less than one half of its younger stage, 1420 degrees. The cosmic seed of the silicon octave is neon. When carbon becomes still another octave older at the 404 position of cobalt in the sixth octave, it divides its full tone into 10 split isotope tones, 5 on either side. Carbon at this stage has lost much of its vitality and changes its character by thus dividing it into cobalt isotopes. Its melting point has dropped to 1480 degrees, which is slightly higher than the silicon stage of carbon. Because of sharing that position with 10 others, it has lost much of its true cube sphere quality of balance, which the 404 position manifests. The evidence of that is the metallic quality of cobalt, which would be impossible in the true cube sphere position of 404 in the octave wave. The 404 position is one of balance between the pairs of metallic opposites, such as iron and nickel, manganese and copper, chromium and zinc, or sodium and chlorine. When any of these pairs lose their metallic quality, such as iron and oxygen and iron rust, or sodium and chlorine and sodium chloride, they find both rest and balance in the stony quality of the salts. They crystallize in a cubic system if they are equal or near equal opposite pairs. Sodium chloride is a good example. One can see its approximately true cubes in sodium chloride, ordinary table salt, or in the distorted cube crystals of sodium iodide. The 404 position in the octaves of the elements is the position of rest where any action must end its half cycle and begin its other half. It comes to a point of rest before returning to a point of rest, as all actions and reactions do in nature. At one octave of still further aging, carbon becomes rhodium and again climbs to its amplitude position at 404 by 5 efforts and descends by 5 more. Rhodium is more vital than cobalt, for its melting point is 1950 degrees. It again refers to that periodic table of elements that he drew in figure 70. The cosmic seed of the rhodium octave is krypton. Great vitality is often evidenced in nature's creations after they have fully matured. The radioactive death principle is as vital in disintegration. Restart that sentence. The radioactive death principle is as vital in disintegrating the body as the genero-active principle is in integrating it. That vitality is enhanced by the opposition of the genero-active resistance set up against it. Such strong vital metals as silver, nickel, copper, tantalum, tungsten, osmium, platinum, and gold belong to the aging half cycles of carbon. Tantalum is a radioactive metal which becomes so dense because of opposition between the two electric conditioners that its melting point reaches 3,400 degrees centigrade, or within 200 degrees of carbon. Osmium follows with a melting point of 2,700 degrees and platinum at 1,755 degrees. In this octave, the violent drop from carbon's melting point to nitrogen's melting point at minus 210 is balanced by this corresponding genero-active reaction. In the next octave of carbon's aging, the radioactive death principle becomes more evident in lutetium. After reaching its 3 position in the positive half of its octave, it arrives at its balance position of 404 only after making 13 efforts, as evidenced by 13 isotopes, including unknowns. These are balanced by 13 in the negative half cycle. Among these 13 is the vital tungsten, a negative metal of great commercial value. By bombarding this metal with a sufficiently high current to cause it to disintegrate, it will discharge its seed of inert cosmic gases just as an oak tree will discharge its cosmic seed in acorns. The cosmic seed of lutetium octave is xenon. The cosmic seed of carbon's last octave of disappearance arises from the inert gas niton. Octaves unfold from their past recorded seed, and they must have a seed into which their present record can refold. That principle is absolute in nature. Radium and actinium evidence the going to seed process of all completed cycles of growing things in a strong measure. One can see this process taking place in radium without resorting to the electrocution process referred to as applied to tungsten. A small telescopic instrument, the spinthariscope, contains a needle upon which a microscopic portion of radium has been placed in front of a fluorescent screen. By looking through its dense lenses in the dark, the word dense wasn't in there. I don't know where that came from. By looking through its lenses in the dark, one can see the shedding of the cosmic seed of the slowly dying carbon in its radium stage as the rays of those cosmic seeds bombard the screen. The effect is beautiful, like looking into the heavens on a starry night with all of its stars twinkling into appearance and disappearance as fireflies twinkle in the meadow on a dark night. Carbon never comes without perception at tomium, but its efforts to reach tomium are evidenced in the uranium groups of isotopes, of which there are 15 before tomium is reached. Out of this group, several have been found and made use of, especially those from which the atom bomb has been produced. Again, it refers back to the periodic table of elements. If you want to take a closer look at that periodic table, I have it on my Instagram page in its closer view, and you can zoom in on it. And it's at Heather Spencer Uncensored, all together on Instagram. That's my Instagram page. But I have a better rendering that you can really look at on my Instagram. Somewhere down in there, I've posted a lot of stuff on Walter Russell and the University of Science and Philosophy there. So anyway, if you're interested in looking in studying that periodic table of elements further to what we're covering here, go to my Instagram at Heather Spencer Uncensored. Anyway, I digress. Radioactivity has so nearly reached its maximum at this point that the speed of the cosmic seed shed by these isotopes has been measured at 180,000 miles per second, which is approximately the speed of light nearing its ending point at tomium, where the octave again begins at alphanon. And I am going to conclude this part of the reading here, and I'll start with the inert gases section of this same chapter in my next video. I love you all, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye.